What's up, guys? Welcome back to another Q&A. It is August 1st, 2018. Did an open Q&A on Facebook this week. Before I start, I'm going to give my buddy Thomas a shout out. I wore your shirt. Try to remember to tag you in this so you see it. Okay. Right. First question. Do you recommend naturals monitor their blood glucose? And if yes, which brand of blood glucose meter do you recommend? I got mine checked, my most recent blood panel, and it was 73 nanograms a deciliter fasted. Can you also go over what number is natural? If that matters, should be looking to maintain while fasted 1 hour postprandial and 2 to 3 hours postprandial. Okay, so it doesn't really matter between natural and enhanced. I mean, the differences would be like if someone's using exogenous growth hormone or insulin, that's gonna how the actual blood glucose is controlled is gonna vary. But I mean, the numbers aren't really different in terms of what's good and what's bad. Everyone's baseline's a little bit different, like in terms of where they sit comfortably. Some people are gonna feel hypo at a much higher blood glucose than other people. But in general, I mean, there's a general range that we can kind of work within. 73 is great, by the way. You really supposedly under 100, some reference ranges will actually be 120. I think that's way too high. I really like to see people at below 90 in most cases if possible, for 2 to 3 hours postprandial and fasted. I'm not really worried if they go above that short term. If they're hanging above that all the time, like especially if they're deep in a fat loss phase and they're really lean and calories are low and they're still hanging close to that 100 mark, that might be an issue. But again, someone's in the 80s, pretty good, 70s, pretty good. And even 90s for some people is okay. But again, it's going to be more about watching that trend over time. So I'm going to want to watch how it's creeping up and creeping down, look at those averages. It's important to realize that it's not going to be the same, even if you eat the exact same things at the exact same times. And even if you are taking exogenous insulin or not, or your routine's exactly the same, it can vary because there are stress hormones like cortisol, adrenaline, and things that actually will cause blood glucose to go up and down. So it's important to remember that as well. So many environmental stress factors that are actually going to alter blood glucose also. So to think that it's going to be exactly the same all the time because you do the same thing is false. So keep that in mind. Look at averages. Don't get too bent out of shape if it's up a little bit one time, as long as it's averaging well. Numbers, like I kind of gave you the numbers. Really, the numbers postprandial and fasted aren't that much different. You should be looking to return close to baseline postprandial, really. 1 hour postprandial is going to be hard to predict just because it really just depends on what you eat. A faster carbohydrate source or higher glycemic is probably going to spike it up a little bit quicker. Something that has some fat with the meal or a slower carbohydrate source might spike up a lot slower. So it might not be as high 1 hour, but it could be still elevated 2 hours because of the nature of the composition of the meal. So I really wouldn't use that unless you're seeing some astronomical spike 1 hour, and you're getting ridiculously slow insulin response. I wouldn't really gauge it off the 1 hour mark too much, but definitely that 2 to 3 hour mark. I like to go a little bit longer than 2 hours. Just because, again, composition of the meal matters, metabolic rate of the person, all those things matter. So basically look at before your next meal. If you're eating 3.5 hours, check it at that 3 hour mark. You want to be baselined or pretty close before your next meal. If you're a little bit higher, postprandial than you are in the morning, that's okay, or vice versa. It's not a huge deal. There are some factors that go into that. But again, you're looking at about the same range. And where to get the glucometer. There's a ton of them. Honestly, a lot of the time the determining factors, just the strips cost so damn much. I mean, a lot of people will use Relion. You can get that on Amazon, I believe at Walmart as well. And the strips are a lot cheaper. It's the same. I found it just as accurate as the more expensive meters, so that might be a good one. Tons of reviews online in terms of accuracy and which meters to look at, so you can kind of look around and see what's available. Come here. Say hi. Say hi. Thank you. Okay. You're going to do this the whole time. Okay. When getting leaner in a dieting phase, if you had a client drop 10 to 15 pounds but their BG levels stayed the same, what would you do to help get them lower? Actually, I kind of touched on this in the first question. It can be stress factors, and that's typically what I see in a fat loss phase. Is it's related to maybe elevated cortisol or elevated adrenaline, or they're started using more stimulants or things like that actually would cause their blood glucose to go up because of those stress hormones being released. So keep that in mind. Also, digestive issues, any systemic stress, inflammation, any of those things are going to cause blood glucose to go up. Typically, the cells aren't going to be as responsive to the glucose. Insulin, a little bit insulin resistance might occur. So, if you're having any GI issues, or you're varying foods a lot and it's causing any kind of GI irritation, or any kind of systemic inflammation just because your body's stressed, all of those things affect it. Typically it does go down, but if it stays the same, it's not a huge deal, because again, those factors can determine alter what you're seeing. So it's something important to keep in mind. So here's one for you. It's kind of a different one. How big do you want to get in goal? Think being bigger, you would get even more clients, inquiries. I'm sure you miss out on clients because of, I'm just going to hire so-and-so. They're huge and pro. That means secrets. Yeah, that happens. But honestly, like the clients that are gonna gravitate towards, so-and-so's a pro and they're big, or huge. I'm not even gonna say big. I'm not like tiny. Well, I'm not huge, but if that's what they gravitate towards, then that's really not the type of client that I'm looking for anyhow. I put out tons of free info. I feel like at this point, the clients that I attract are the type of clients that I want for the most part, and the referrals that I get are typically the kind of clients that I want. So I really don't have that problem. The people that are kind of sucked into that kind of thing, probably not the kind of people that I want to work with anyhow. Would it help? Yeah, it does help. I'll give you an example. Anytime I do a show and post show photos, not even show photos, just photos leading up to the show, that normally causes some flux in client inquiries. You got to market yourself a little bit. I think it's important. I don't think it's a bad thing, as long as you're not, not a freaking tool bag about it. But yeah, I guess maybe, but again, I don't think that's really going to attract the type of clients that I want. How big do I want to get? I have no idea. As big as I can get without taking 20 years off my life, really. That's always been my goal. So, I've added, I don't know, I've added probably 50 some pounds of my stage weight since competing. So, it's not, and I haven't done anything super crazy. But I'm meticulous about everything and have been, and I kind of know where my comfort zone lies in terms of health and what kind of calculated risks I'm willing to take. So, as long as I stay within that, I think ultimately just with my way my frame is and what I can hold, I think that I could be top of the heavyweight class with a very mature, dense look and so on and so forth, and not ruin my physique and look very good there with my height and my frame and everything. And that's kind of my goal. I don't know where that would take me necessarily. I think realistically, that's going to take me a little bit longer. Obviously, it's a big jump from light heavyweight to heavyweight. My body is definitely ready to grow. It's trying to grow. So I think once I get there around maybe 30, early 30s, then I'm pretty much going to hang out there and mature and stay there. I don't know that I would be able to stay within those calculated risks that I talked about and be a super heavyweight. I could probably get over 225 stage weight, but it's not like, I'm talking super heavy, like 245, 250. So probably not. It's just not really willing to do that to my body. And I know, kind of like I said, I know how it reacts health wise to things, and it's not great. I have always had a hard time with health. I'm healthy, but it's because I'm very meticulous and can only do so much in terms of training, nutrition, everything really, just because I do have such a tendency to have different health complications. And, I think a lot of it's probably just genetic, but it is what it is. So, okay, with my shift work, insulin sensitivity, big carb meals, send my BG pretty high, and it takes a while for it to get back to baseline. 1 or 2 units of insulin drops it very quickly, presumably as its added exogenous output equals more insulin in the bloodstream. Sorry, it's added to endogenous output. Question: is it healthier practice to do this and get these big levels down quicker as opposed to slower natural drop? Well, there's not really any time frames on here, so I'm not really sure. Are we talking, like I talked above about getting back to baseline close to your next meal, or, around that 3-hour mark or 2.5 hour mark? Is that happening? If it is, then maybe it's not a bad thing. Maybe you need to change the macronutrient composition of your diet in general. Maybe you just are insulin resistant a little bit. Maybe you are pre-diabetic. Maybe that's just shit happens as you age. Stuff gets wore out. I'd much rather see someone probably do a couple units of insulin and return to baseline normally at a normal rate than not, because that slight bit of insulin resistance you have is just going to add up continuously. Those beta cells are going to get wore out, and you're eventually going to end up, in a bad spot. So you mentioned 1 to 2 units is adding to endogenous output. Yeah, from what we know, it seems like if you're not going over what you're endogenously producing, then it's just adding to it. So, if your body's putting out 2 units and you add 2 units, or your body's putting out 3 units and you add 2 units, then you have 5 units type of thing. Whereas if you use 10, obviously it's just going to cancel out what your endogenous production is. But where that lies, like where that ratio kind of stops, it's really hard to say. But in theory, what you're saying is 100% correct and would be a relatively good idea, at least from what you're telling me. Okay, not really related to training or diet. I know every coach has their own way of sending info via G Sheets, Mac Excel, but where do you go to learn how to make these templates for programming and whatnot? Currently helping some family and friends and for free, and have trouble sending and receiving info. I don't know, to be honest. If you don't, it doesn't have to, the thing is, it doesn't have to be complicated. You can build training programs on Word documents. And honestly, some of my favorite training programming is on Word documents, because it allows me to just be descriptive and detail things and talk, like add dialogue to the training program as I'm writing it, down the sheet. Versus I will use Excel templates for certain things, but that adding notes and stuff gets a little bit trickier. So it really depends on what the programming is. Sometimes that's fine. Sometimes it's easier just to literally just write it out on a Word document. So just do that. That's really all you need to do. And you can do the same thing with nutrition plans as well. Keep it simple. If it doesn't sound like that's what you're doing for a living, I wouldn't really worry about anything elaborate. Create a couple folders on your computer, nutrition training, bam, type thing. You can use Google Drive. Some people do that. Any program that has templates on it. If you want to use Excel template or some kind of spreadsheet that has sets, reps, RPE, rest, like all those things I would typically add to training. You can do that as well. If you need to actually learn like the features of like Microsoft Office type thing, then you're going to need to go online, go to Google. I imagine you can find all the videos if that's what you're asking. So that's kind of my take on that. Okay, 2 more. All right. Do you have a protein limit that you won't go past for people in gaining phases, like say 200-pound guy hits 400 grams of protein? Beyond that, you only go carbs and fat. Not really. With some of the research on protein overfeeding and some of just anecdotal stuff and some of the things I've tried with people, I don't really have an upper limit. I think digestion kind of is the limiting factor. And there are things you can do like intake betaine HCl, increased stomach acidity, helps with protein digestion. So you can kind of push it up artificially a little bit more. Someone's supplementation is going to make a difference in terms of what they're going to utilize. Protein is very metabolically expensive in terms of converting to glucose. Like a lot of people throw around gluconeogenesis or genesis, and like it certainly happens. It just doesn't happen, I think, quite as easily as people think. And protein is very metabolically expensive to store as fat as well. So, it's experiment with it, try to run it really high. And if you're enhanced, maybe go a little higher. Growth hormone and insulin will definitely make that ceiling a lot higher. But you can run it high regardless. This past weekend, the Physique Summit, someone actually spoke on it, a natural athlete, and how they had a lot of success running it high, and that they noticed their body composition improved even though their calories were up higher than normal, and all those extra calories came from protein. And I think that's more or less what the protein overfeeding studies have showed us as well. So, and what some of the anecdotal stuff has shown us. I tell you right now, personally, I'm pushing mine pretty high, like higher than I normally would. I feel like the returns are pretty good. So, take that for what it's worth. But no, not really. Digestion would probably be the limiting factor there. How does your meal plan food sources look every day? Is it the same every day, or do you wing it daily? Well, no, I do not wing it. I have a plan. I know that's not what you're asking, but it's similar. Like off days, similar plan, and training days are similar plan. I'm really busy, so it's not like I'm not sitting cooking. My cooking, I can cook. I can make fancy stuff. I can make macro friendly, nice recipes. I just don't have time. So it's typically the same kind of stuff. But I do rotate meats and rotate veggies and rotate carbs and stuff within the week. It might be the same a couple days in a row, and then I might. You all right? And then I might just rotate it, one day to the next, or like go Monday and Tuesday the same, rotate it on Wednesday or something like that. But no, it doesn't change a ton. I have a pretty good database worth of, list of foods that I'll rotate within. I might throw something completely random in here and there, but I feel like I rotate enough not to cause food sensitivities and things along that line. So as far as setup, I time my carbs and fat. I train at different times. It's hard for me to say because I do train at different times depending on appointments. Like if I have appointments to go to, or Skype calls to make, or podcasts to record, or whatever. If it's just a day where I don't have any of that, I'm just answering emails and stuff, then I'll train like right in the middle of the day where emails are the slowest. But outside of that, it totally varies. Right now, my nutrition is changing so much because I'm post-show. My body's adapting very quickly. But I do have a little bit of carbs intra-workout, not a lot. A little bit more post-workout, and then I have some of my last meal. I typically train. Lately, it seemed like I'm having to train earlier in the day, so I like those carbs in the last meal for my next morning session. Fats and carbs separated, proteins relatively even throughout the day, type of thing. Food sources, I eat all kinds of. I eat chicken, egg whites, rice, potatoes, rice cakes. I eat some crazy shit. I do like I do like different meats. I do like to go get kind of fancy with my meats. I love organ meats. I eat a lot of like organic grass-fed meats, liverwurst, sweetbreads. What I have, hearts, pancreas, thymus. I mean, like all these weird organ meats and stuff. I have a bunch of exotic stuff coming in the mail, actually. Like some, I think, emu meat, some wild Hawaiian deer meat, some ostrich meat, I got all kinds of stuff coming. Quail eggs, some, so I do go kind of wild with my, with my meats and stuff, because I just like the different tastes and I like the different, micronutrients. So, but yeah, that's kind of in terms of timing and stuff, that's what you're looking at. And that is it for now. And for that last question, I mean, I can post up a sample days of eating here soon. I'd probably do that. So thanks, guys. I'll talk to you next time.